It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the assignment of the topic because while I realize that I have had a lot of experience working in healthcare organizations, I had never really sat down and thought about what do I have to share with other people based on that experience, and what might I even tell my own students about working successfully on their senior design projects or on their master's projects. And so in preparing this, I've found a way to sort of communicate some of the things that I would like to leave behind, so to speak, as things move along. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about San Jose State and me, and I'd like to talk about briefly the types of projects I've worked on and the lessons I've learned, and something about what's changing in healthcare and how that's going to affect your career. And finally, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. I come from a place called San Jose State University, which celebrated its 150th anniversary a few years ago. It's the largest of 23 California state campuses. Which has 430,000 students. It is not the University of California, which is the other California State University system. But now we're adding doctoral programs. Our campus has 32,000 students in 7 colleges. It's right in the heart of Silicon Valley, which means most of our students are thinking about working for places like Google and Intuit and Yahoo and Microsoft, which has a major area there, and Facebook, and you name it. 65 academic departments, and by the way, those are palm trees, and we do recommend that you take a look at them closely. The Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering has 4 main graduate or degree programs. One is a bachelor's in industrial engineering, and then we also have a master's in industrial engineering, the MS in engineering management, and the MS in human factors and ergonomics, which I direct and have directed for 20 years now. We started that in 1993. We have about 90 students in the master's in human factors and ergonomics, and a lot of them are interested in user interaction and human-computer interface and user experience, and they go to work in the companies that I mentioned, so they have lots of internship opportunities. Our undergraduate program was ranked 3rd in the country in universities that do not have doctoral degree programs, which was its ranking in 2009. For several years, actually, it had been ranked. And then they stopped ranking programs that don't have doctoral degrees. So we just consider ourselves still number 3, and we like to think of it that way. We are adding a health systems emphasis area that will intersect with both the MS in industrial engineering and also the MS in human factors and ergonomics. And in addition, we're hiring 2 tenure track faculty for fall 14, one in human factors and one in big data. And these are both advanced positions if the personnel are qualified. About me, I have a bachelor's and master's in industrial engineering. I have a Ph.D. from the University of Michigan as a Kellogg Fellow, which is I got started in the academic side of health systems. An MS and Ph.D., both in hospital-related projects. I worked on 2 projects that were hospital-related. Ben mentioned the one in my doctoral work, which was difficulty in nursing assignments. I had a previous one, which nobody knows about. It was about training for a new mail delivery system. University, which was a program learning. It was a program learning experiment. You've never heard of program learning, right? Program learning. So that was popular in the early part of last century. Then I taught at the University of Missouri at Columbia for 4 years, and then I also worked for Medical Systems Corporation for about 7 years in Chicago, and that was a consulting assignment that Ben was talking about. That company set up and managed industrial engineering in-house programs in hospitals. So if a hospital wanted management engineering but didn't want to hire their own, they hired medicus to come in and set it up. So I directed programs in multiple hospitals, and we hired industrial engineers to work in those hospitals as systems engineers, basically. And that went on until they bought a company called Colloquia, what was it called? Colloquia, I think, a medical system, and that was a information system advance. I went to San Jose State in 1986 and joined the faculty there. And I've been consulting over 20 years while I've been at San Jose State. Once for about 10 years at a company called Nikon Associates, which wound up actually being bought by GE. But before they were bought, they did hospital-wide performance benchmarking at a department level. Their deal was to sell a hospital on a send us your data and we will send you a report kind of a model. And in the report, you will see your hospital's data compared to all other hospitals like you in our database. So it was a benchmarking kind of a framework for departmental managers. And then they provided that report, and then they also provided the service of helping the managers understand what the report said and think about what to do next. I also work for a company called Spectra Laboratories, which processes blood for hemodialysis patients. And that's another major business area for laboratories. I worked for them on primarily on a project related to how do you predict the hemoglobin based on the EPO dose that you gave, and where does dosing and hemoglobin results get predicted. So I worked on that for Spectra, and then subsequently never solved that, by the way. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. I've been active over the years in IIE as an officer and the Society for Health Systems, which has been mentioned as an officer, and also in HIMSS. And lately I've been working with a professional organization called the International Society for Service Innovation Professionals, ISSIP, because as I'll say later, we're all service innovation professionals at heart. And although we're working in healthcare, service innovation is our main genre. So we're like service innovation professionals in other sectors: transportation, logistics, entertainment, hotels, you name it, all of the government. So service innovation professionals are working all across our spectrum. As you know, 80% of our economy is service, and we are all hopefully going to be in that domain. So I've been working with this organization. It's sponsored by IBM and Cisco and a few other major companies, and I can tell you more about that. I've directed projects in patient acuity systems. I've directed projects in work measurement, nursing assignments, also economic control charts for application of nursing management, and did that at Henry Ford with Bill Schramm. System benefits and cost assessments with Clinicom, re-engineering a radiology department over at Georgetown University Medical Center with Econ, and I mentioned the departmental productivity and predicting hemoglobin projects. But right now I'm also directing student projects for our bachelor's degree program in industrial engineering. The culminating project is a 2-semester experience, and I have the department responsibility for forming teams, finding them projects, and supervising their work on the projects. A lot of the projects are going on at the County Medical Center, Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, which is a large organization, county-wide, part of the county health system. And these are the types of projects that some of our students have worked on recently. So I know that your new hospital project looks a lot like the trees in a forest and might not seem quite so clear as you begin it. So what I want to know is, what are your apprehensions? What are the kinds of things you're thinking? I'll tell you what I was thinking and what my students think. They're hesitant to go anywhere because it looks unfamiliar. They're also worried about not being able to fully understand large, complex organizations like hospitals. They don't know which steps to take to get an understanding of the process, and I'm not sure how their mentor or their client is going to tolerate the kinds of information requests that they're going to be getting them. They want to avoid disrupting anything that's going along. It'd be nice if, like a patient, you could wear all of your cautions on your wrist, and so nobody would bother you about the things that you're apprehensive about, but you can't. This is not something we're allowed to do. So I'm going to say that in getting ready for your project, you're going to have to establish a formal point of contact person, a person who's a mentor or a client and somebody that you are going to relate to as the director of the project. You're going to expect that that person is going to assume overall responsibility for your project He or she is going to connect you to key elements of your organization, tell you when there are resources you might be able to get or contacts that you might be able to make, and we'll make those contacts for you. And we'll tell you when and where there are problems. This is going to be a major role that you want your mentor to tell you about problems, and may delegate, but is always there for you when you need to get to that mentor. It's somebody who is your point of contact. Students in my class, for example, were assigned to look at the trauma room as a project. Improve the trauma room was basically their challenge. And then when they opened the door to the trauma room, this is what they saw. A trauma room is a place where they bring emergency patients who need immediate care by a large team. So as you know, when there's such an emergency going on, a lot of things have to be there and ready to be used. This is what the students were facing. So they felt that that was very vague, and their approach was to get with the mentor, find out more specifically about what were the issues that the mentor needed to have addressed. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. One of the things was the organization of supplies and carts in the trauma room. This is a photo of the actual cart. And as you can see, it does not look too well organized. And it took quite a while for them as students and as coming into an environment like that, to figure out they don't know what's there either. They don't know how much stuff is on that cart or whether there's too much of one thing and not enough of another. But when you look at it, because of the complexity of the place, you really just don't have that understanding without getting into it. So become familiar with the process, and this can include process maps, flow charts, value stream maps, whatever. Request local previous work. This is very important to keep in mind. There are previous studies, more than likely, in any healthcare facility that you walk into. There are sales presentations. There are proposals. There is, in fact, information on the web that you can get to. So ask for this so that you can familiarize yourself with what's been done there previously. If it's relevant research topics that can be less familiar to you. And look for similarities between what you're being asked to look for and your own experience, and particularly with regard to acuity. Do you know what, have you heard of patient acuity? Do you know what that word means? I know behind you, I'm not getting a lot of yeses. Patient acuity is how much nursing time, for example, the patients require. It's a scale of need on the part of patients for nursing time or for some other service level. So we think of it as patient acuity. Well, there's acuity for med-surg patients, there's acuity for ICU patients, there's acuity for psychiatric patients, for pediatric patients. Every type of patient has a separate type of acuity framework for purposes of establishing the need for nursing time. But one model may help you understand what to do in the next setting, and that's what I mean. Look for similarities between the way in which your previous experience might map into a challenge that you're facing now. Learn the organization and who's who. Become familiar with staff in all areas who know how to ask for information. Think about their professional groups, about informal organizations, which will make meetings and interactions much easier. And when it comes to meetings, time is money. Be respectful and aware of everybody's time. Be prepared and organized for scheduled meetings and schedule meetings. Do not think that you can simply drop in and expect people in management roles to be ready and available for you to chat with when you get there for your project afternoon. Work to develop buy-in. What is buy-in? People outside and inside your project committed to the same agenda you have, right? So how does that work? You have to develop that. That may be okay from the point of view of the mentor, but other people working for the mentor may not have already bought in, and many people outside the organization that you have a need to interact with may not have bought in yet either. So think in terms of developing buy-in. It's the way in which you'll be successful with your project. By buy-in, I mean talking about the organizational recognition of the project, helping each participant to understand how the project resonates with one of their core agendas, seek referrals within the organization, know about relevant prior experiences and outcomes, be reasonable about resource requirements, have a clear method that you can explain to people so that they understand where they will be involved, and make sure that you tell them before they get involved. Be open to suggestions and alternative approaches. Be prompt, neat, reliable, and have confidence, and plan for and allow slack. Jargon and terminology can get in your way if you don't take time to learn it as you get into your project. Each area has its own jargon or terminology, and you'll want to know what that is. They don't know that they're using it. That's a secret. They'll talk to you and use jargon, but you won't have any idea that they don't realize that you don't know. So what would you do? You have to ask them about terminology that they've used again and again that you have not yet heard. Look for previous internal reports and studies, and the jargon may show up there. It may be something you can find out early enough, and certainly current reports and discussions with colleagues. We don't really benefit from a surface dive. This is from one of our mentors. Those reveal what we already know. You have to do the deep dive. Find out the things that they don't know. Get the data that they haven't really seen yet, or put it together in a way that they haven't looked at it. That's what we're thinking of in terms of a deep dive for your project. Identify pain points, which are discovered through interviews, through observation, such as this in the trauma room. Here's a pain point, but looking at it, you can't see it. I don't know where it is until somebody who works there through an interview tells me that this is a problem for them. Because the X-ray machine is in front of the supply cart, they can't get to the supplies when they need it. That's something that the team could identify then as an agenda, as a pain point that they would like to address in their study. And of course, data is another way to look at it. The new kitchen will be in the new services building, and cook chill carts will be used to move trays to the patient units. Think about it. The new kitchen will be in the new services building, and cook chill trays and carts will be used to move trays to the patient units. Any pain points in that statement? Dive, dive, dive. Here is a view of what the nursing units look like inside the hospital area. Here is one area of nursing units. Here is another area of nursing units currently. And here is the current kitchen with its 3 elevators. Remember, the new kitchen will be in the new services building, and carts will be used. Here's the new services building relative to the current nursing units. And here is where the carts will be moved. So we have a 500-foot tunnel that carts will be used to move food between the kitchen and the new services building and the patient units. Information will be required, but consider all sources. You can consider your own methodologies, like observations from work sampling, from time studies, and other kinds of methodologies that you know will produce data. But you can also collect data from current systems, data that is already embedded in their own data center, that may help you understand things like waiting times and things like numbers of requests and arrival times, and things that you may not want to stand there and wait for, but are already embedded in the data sets that they already have. So you should be able to think ahead to make the most out of each site's visit without prior requests. Plan on adapting methodologies. Explore creating methodologies. That is, in the trauma room, create a methodology for analyzing the trauma room's situation. Difficulty, which I worked on, was a way of creating a methodology to work on a problem, which was how much workload is associated with a nursing assignment. We could time study that, but we would have no cyclic work to work from. We could work sample it, but that would be based on their current time and activities and not simply a way to structure things differently. So a new methodology was designed, that I designed, came up with a methodology to survey nurses, develop a scale of difficulty, and apply it to the assignment to assess how much workload was there. Design studies to focus on the key data required, not more data than you need, but certainly not less data than you need. Think about how data will be analyzed, used, and presented. Document the complex areas with photographs. Think about what a photo can tell you later offline so you can sit down and study it. Request documentation from the hospital that they may use to train their own people. And this is something that can be very useful. This is from the trauma room, and this was something they always used, but didn't realize that we didn't know. Every position around that table is occupied by a particular specialist within their organization for each case. This means that we know now exactly how that bed looks when there is a case there. Also, though, we'll have daily logs. Not everything is on the computer, and there will be daily logs. This is recent from the dietary department. Learn about the systems supporting these activities, learn about documentation and recent printouts, and learn about planned changes that may be coming that they've already approved. Set a timeline, have a general project plan and proposal, give it to the team members and make sure the team members are on the plan. Include update meetings, plan for catch-up, plan for data analysis, and review the plan with mentors so that the mentors can understand what your plan is for the project. Try to schedule as many meetings and presentations as soon as possible, and then the way ahead will seem clear. No more forest. Time to emerge and conduct the project. So be on time, be well prepared, make sure people know you are coming, communicate. And this is one of the key things throughout the project. Make sure you communicate at the beginning, certainly, who you are, what you're going to be doing, what you plan to achieve, and try to get them to talk to people they haven't talked to lately. Between department communication is something you can sponsor and foster. Train and orient those who will be involved in your project, set expectations, use their terminology to the extent that you can, describe your responsibilities and discover any new barriers. Be ready to grant anonymity if you have to, where possible and appropriate, but never ever violate any confidentiality rules, laws, HIPAA, whatever. Never look at anything you're not expected to be seeing, if it's even out and about on a nursing station or out and about on a person's desk. It is not for you to look at if it's not part of your project. Figure out how to be non-intrusive. Respond promptly, seek out the help you know you'll need, and then ask about what help they know you'll need, which are two sides of the same coin. You're going to need help. Some of it you know about, and some of it they know about, but may not be thinking about unless you ask. So those are the kinds of things you should have in mind. And then keep getting buy-in and develop progress updates. Then I want to remind you that you know some terminology. What terminology do you know? What are the things that you already have in your vocabulary that they don't know? Lead time, holding cost, EOQ. You might have an inventory project going on, and you might want to use some of this terminology. Please do. Queuing, queue lengths, queue discipline, service time distribution. These are all terms that to you are just the way everybody thinks, but not to them. Setup time, downtime, constraints, objectives, USL, LSL, AQL. These are all your terminologies. So don't be embarrassed about it. They help you do your analysis in your methodology framework, and that's good. But you should be aware that when you say AQL to them, they may not know what you're talking about. They probably won't know what you're talking about. So be aware of that also. And then I always like to put in work measurement kinds of terms as well. If variations in plan methods are needed, get permission for the variations first. If it's a lengthy project, get regular status meetings going so everybody's kept up to date on where we are and where we're going to be next week. Show information as it's being collected and solicit questions and concerns. Discuss problems and solicit suggestions. And don't forget, you have to deep dive for your data. These are students who are working on projects this semester, who are, in fact, touring the new kitchen or finding out where the sterile supply instruments go in the operating room and taking a look by getting there in the appropriate attire. Remember that chart? Get a place at the table. Go into the room. See a trauma. See what happens. See why people are concerned about organizing the trauma room. The two students that did this did that. Nights, weekends, they were there waiting for traumas, and when they came in, the students gowned up and went into the trauma with the staff. It was a teaching hospital. They're used to having students around. And the fact that there are engineering students made no difference at all, except perhaps a little more explanation during the time frame. But get in there and see it so you can look at it from a systems point of view and have a place and a respect level gained through that to give them your advice. Otherwise, you've never been there, they have. Put things into your own terminology. You look at a photo like this, what you need is a layout. What you need is something you can analyze, something you can measure, something you can rearrange and make it another proposal. So put it into your terms. This is the place where that pain point was. Now you can see where the radiology part is, in fact, in front of the supply cart down here. That was the pain point they're talking about, but you really can't see it just by standing there and looking. You have to put it into your own terminology. If it's a supply cart that looks like this, make it look like this. Understand what's on it. Ask them, what is each one of these things? It may be all disorganized, but at least you have the tools, and from your perspective, to make sense out of how it can be analyzed. And that's the point I want to make to you. Don't just look at it and say, okay, that looks like a messy card, and can we take those off? Can we take that? Take the time to put it into your term, do your own analysis, and then make a recommendation. If the pain point is not already documented, collect data to see if it's really there. And in this case, boarding hours per patient in the emergency department, which is what they were complaining about, is in fact really there. The data substantiates that. So now we have a baseline, we have a real data point. We can go after boarding hours and see what we can do about discharging patients and whatever in the emergency room. But without the data set, the pain point is just a complaint, really. It's just a complaint. We have a lot of patients backing up. We have ambulances backing up in the driveway. And, gee, you know, that's probably, we need more beds. Well, maybe they do need more beds. But if we get more beds, does this point come down to 4 again, or does it go down to 3 again? Where does the new beds get us to? Territories. This was something Ben asked me to specifically bring about into the discussion, and I'm glad he did, because it is an important aspect. This is the role of the ISE, is often to go across territories. The way I represent this is you have departments, and they have their own hierarchy and their own management structure. And then you also have what? You have specialties, clinical specialties. They have their own hierarchy and their own structure. And they're on top of the departments, in a sense. They're also there, right? And then you also have professions, and they have their own statutes, and the chiefs and the whatever. So you've got hierarchies within hierarchies within hierarchies in the hospital organization. This is what we mean by territory. Everybody's got their own zone that they're sort of concerned about, and they often overlap or intersect. ISE projects might deal with only one of those hierarchies. They might deal with another. They might deal with a couple. They might deal with all 3 of them at the same time. It's important to keep in mind your role as a systems development and innovator, that all the hierarchies have to be involved, because they all may be affected by if it's a management request to study the trauma room, then you need to look at it not just from management's point of view in terms of staffing and numbers of this and that, but you also have to think in terms of the hierarchy of the clinicians that are in there, the nurses. There's a whole range of nursing personnel in there. There's a whole range of trauma medical specialty in there. So everybody has to be involved. In fact, that project was initiated by the medical and the nursing and the management. It was all three groups together saying, we got a problem here. And so the student team had to deal with all of that. You'll need to gain experience with various clinical and technical groups, and I do dives into their worlds when possible. I go to conferences, I look at their journals, I go to workshops, I look at what committees I can get on to meet people in other places. And as I conduct projects, I try to meet people up the line in each of the organizational zones. I get active in Society for Health Systems and HIMSS, both of which are multidisciplinary. That's how you get familiar with other hierarchies and territories within the organization, as you well know. Conference committees, seeking out territorial subgroups and significant interest groups within these organizations. ASQ, as you know, has a Baldrige healthcare community, and IHI, of course, is multidisciplinary by design. So there's a lot of organizational strategies that you can go to learn about what these other hierarchies and their territories represent. Be alert for direct requests. Don't do this anymore. This is something you should not ever think about, doing again in this project. Direct requests, telling you right out in front, I don't think you should be doing it. Look for new and amended project guidelines from your mentor, or unfulfilled data commitments, or missed meetings, or unanswered messages. These are all signs that your project may be in difficulty, and things that you need to attend to. All are important, but consider where they come from. Are they coming from inside your project, that is the people in your staff that you're working with, or are they coming from outside? Is the word getting out that something's wrong with your project? And therefore, you need to address the external elements of information as well as the internal project participants. Be close enough to the mentor to ask about this. And we had a situation where we thought we were close enough. This was an emergency department situation where the director of the emergency department was very supportive all the way through. Students are doing fine, everything's going fine, everything's going fine. We asked to come back for another project. No, I don't think so. Why? The students would show up. They wouldn't tell me they're coming. They just would expect to be able to see me anytime. And I really thought that it took much more time than I was expecting to have to give. We thought we were close, but we weren't close enough. The project director wasn't close, that's me. But also the inside mentor, the person that had arranged the project for me, wasn't close enough. Now we're back in the emergency room and doing more projects, but we had to work through that. We had to find out about it first. And it didn't come up during the project. It only came up when we asked for another project. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. It's not always as easy as it looks. To complete your project, you have 4 stages. One is to finalize your recommendations, then make a presentation, in my opinion. Third is to report, and then fourth is what I call final rounds. And to finalize your recommendations, it's okay to review these with the client. You can go to your client and say, here's what my report's going to say. What do you think about this? Well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. Why? Well, here are the barriers, here are the objections, and try to address those in the next stages of your final work, that is the final report. But review your recommendations with the mentor. Focus on pain point issues. Focus on objective analysis that you've done. And also find out if any of your recommendations have already been implemented. Guess what? Is that good or bad? If they picked up on something you were going to think to recommend and have already recommended it, what do you think? Can you still say it in your report? Sure you can. It's your recommendation. They happen to have already accepted it. That's great. So find out about those. And you don't have to point out that it's already recommended, but you certainly can count that with a little more certainty in the benefits analysis. You'll want to use graphs to display what you found and what your data says. They may not understand these graphs. These are not their way of talking. And we've had a couple of experiences where we presented graphs, and then we realized that they were looking at those graphs with, sort of a curiosity that was unexpected. What is that saying, and how do I look at that, and why can you flip through that as fast as you did without pointing out everything on that graph? Don't assume that they're going to understand your language of communication in terms of data, presentation, and analysis. Make sure your report says what they should see there. Use the graph, that's okay, but just make sure that you explain what you want them to get out of that. And certainly in your oral presentation, take enough time to go through whatever's important in this graph. If you're going to make a recommendation about layout, make it on a layout. Don't make it by trying to describe it. In this case, in the trauma room, this was the previous layout, and this is the recommended layout. Now, there are a lot of changes here. I'm not going to ask you to look at the changes, but the way they documented the potential importance of this recommendation was by taking a single trauma case. It happened to be a pediatric trauma case that came in that was described in detail, and they mapped everybody's travel pattern from that team around the room during the course of that case and found out there was a total of 200 feet of travel distance across the specialties that moved around the room. They showed that for that same case, the recommended travel distance went down by 43% from the previous layout of the room, just on the basis of where things were. Not rearranging where the team members were, but where the things were that they had to go to. So this meant that the layout change, was driven home by an example that they could then relate to. It's not having to evaluate the layout piece by piece, but in the context of what it really would mean in the way they work. And so I'd urge you to use examples like that in your own analysis. Now there should be a presentation after you formalize your recommendations. And the presentation should be targeted to your audience, which I've already sort of indicated by the graphs and so forth. It should focus on the goals of your project originally, and it should also discuss the pain points. You need to address the points you've heard about and be sure that they're all addressed. And it should also include acknowledgments and allow for group discussion. This is all part of your presentation framework. Then the report, which typically I organize, or I ask students to organize in this manner with an executive summary and an introduction, objectives, assumptions, methods and tools used, and then also key results and recommendations which address the issues and the suggestions made during the presentation. You give the presentation so you can get the key results aligned with what people think when they hear the recommendations. So the report, which is going to stay present, can address things that you've heard about, at least with regard to recommendations. Benefits, a plan for implementations, and acknowledgments. People have helped you, and it's not inappropriate to acknowledge them during the time that you're finalizing your report. Provide references, and then determine a format. I've been recently asked to do more PowerPoint reports than actual written document reports. People are much more comfortable with seeing things in slide format than they are in reading a whole document of all the methodology and so forth. I don't know if that's something you're familiar with. But in general, you have some choices about the report format, but I think it's important to leave a report, to have something that's finished that represents the end of the project. Then what I call final rounds is going around all those people that you've worked with during the project and touching base with them, telling them what you've appreciated and what you think has been the benefit, and listening to what they have to say about the project, both in terms of individuals as well as the organizational elements. Now it's a win-win situation. One of my contacts has a future engineer contact, and the other has a healthcare professional contact. So the people you work with become people that you know in the future, and you can go back to them. You can ask them about things that weren't related to the project, that may relate to another project. So these become your professional colleagues and your potential associates. Sponsors will ask, what's in it for us? What do they get out of this? Mostly, I feel the benefit is in the information and perspective that the ISE can bring, the ISE's analytical skills, and the ISE's ideas that aren't readily available internally. You can bring a lot to them. Remember, they're there every day working with these same problems and systems. You come in with an outside perspective. It's very important to them. That's something they can get out of this. In addition, you can bring resourcefulness of this resurgence of the spirit of inquisitiveness. Don't just accept things as they are. Think about how things can be. Expose a lack of knowledge about affinity and the affinity for the status quo, and still a desire to learn and explore. That's often contagious. Everyone should benefit from this kind of experience, not just you, but also the people that you're working with and working for. In the future, you're going to be shaped by experience in other aspects of your lives. Healthcare systems, patients and services will be integrated and smart. You've heard the term smart world, smart city, smarter planet. Now the term is becoming Internet of Things. Internet of Things or Internet of Everything. Do you know what that means? How many of you know what that means? Okay, think in terms of a future where everything has a sensor in it and everything is connected to the Internet. This is the Internet of everything. Your car is already connected. Your phones are connected. Things in your homes are connected. But some cities now are putting connections inside of trash cans so that they can reroute the pickups to only the cans that are full. The cans are connected. Okay. Patients will be connected. Devices will be connected. Everything is connected to the Internet. They're predicting in 2020, 20 billion objects connected to the Internet. I'm sorry. Yeah, everything. I'm sorry. I said 2020, 50 billion things connected to the Internet. That's the Internet of everything. At the end of October, I just learned Cisco is sponsoring a conference in Barcelona about the Internet, the Internet of Things and how we're going to get there. Many, many big companies are engaged in this. Companies that don't even talk to each other are coming to this meeting because the idea is that the Internet of everything is going to be the future. Okay, the government may not get us there based on the way things are going, but the companies are already taking us there, and they are going to make this happen because it's good business. It's a $1.7 trillion business, the Internet of everything. Healthcare is in there. We will see sensors on everything, in the hospital, on the patients, on the practitioners, every device. You will be working in that environment. So Facebook is just the beginning, you know. The kinds of things you're doing with social networking and so forth now, just the beginning of the way you're going to be using the Internet in healthcare. Patient care will firmly become patient experience. So I've already heard the term here today. Patients will become impatients. They're going to be getting experiences through services of every other sector of our economy. And they're going to expect the same kind of experience in healthcare. Not just care, but experience, right? And so when you go to a hotel, you don't just expect to go check in and get to a plain old room. You expect the experience, and that's doing more than the customer expected. Impatience. And I don't know if you've heard of Shoulder's Hospital. I test marketed the concept here with Vin just a minute ago. How many of you have heard of Shoulder's Hospital? In Toronto, just outside Toronto. They've been in business since 1945. They only do hernias. And they have the best hernia deal in the world. It's a private hospital. But the patient, you can go onto YouTube and look up a video called Stitch in Time, A Stitch in Time, and write in Shoulders after that to be sure you get That's stitch in time. And then watch that video. What they do there and what they represent in terms of the future kind of concept of experience is why I'm bringing this up, is very telling, I think, for what you should be thinking you'll see in the future. Co-production will become the norm. We're already co-producing our healthcare. You co-produce with your physician when you go to a visit. You co-produce many aspects of your healthcare now. But it will become a norm. I mean, who would have thought that you have to take your bag onto the plane for the airline and put it in the rack so that you have your bag when you get there? Who thought of co-producing would ever go that way? But we've all accepted it, right? Those are the kinds of things that are going to happen and that have happened. And in healthcare, I imagine that some surgeon will say, you know what? Why don't you pick out the suture you'd like and bring it with you? You'll co-produce your surgery. Hold that nut. You'll co-produce your surgery. These are the kinds of things that are, no, it's serious, because you can tell that everything is moving toward co-production. You do it with your bank, you do it with when you shop at a supermarket, you're co-producing your service experience at a supermarket by going to the shelf and picking up the food. That's not the way it always was. It used to be there was a person behind the counter who would go get it for you and bring it to you. But now you don't even think about that because everybody has got you co-producing it. You're co-producing your payment. You go to a machine to check out of the supermarket. You're co-producing that, right? So co-production is the way things are headed, and it's going to be very important. In addition, systems to enable self-service with smart devices will become the norm. So as ISEs in healthcare, I just want to leave you with this concept. You'll be joining many other service innovation professionals in many other dimensions of our life experiences. You'll become what we call a T-shaped professional. T-shaped means you have a core field or a core discipline, and then you have experiences that lend to your ability to communicate across disciplines and to learn about service innovations across the economy and see what applications might exist in your own domains. Boundary crossing competencies involve teamwork, communication, perspective, networks, critical thinking, global understanding. These are the kinds of boundary crossing skills you're developing in your health systems program in healthcare. But you'll have a core discipline, HSYE is your core discipline probably. In my case, I was an ISE as a core discipline, and then health systems became sort of a boundary crossing kind of experiential discipline for me. Then I added ergonomics as another boundary crossing thing, but ISE has always been my core discipline. In your case, you may have health systems ISE as your core discipline, and maybe long-term care applications of this core discipline across many different fields or areas of long-term care. But maybe also healthcare IT might become a boundary crossing discipline or area of practice for you. With health systems IE always as your core, place you go home to, so to speak, involving teamwork. So where are we headed? We're going through the International Society for Service Innovation into the zone of how do we get to know how T-shaped people are? That's really an interesting question for many companies, because what they really want are T-shaped individuals in their companies, and hospitals will too. People who can work across disciplines, who have a core competency, but are experienced in many different kinds of areas and have an ability to work across them. So basically what we're trying to get at is a metric that goes from your resume, your standard resume, to a metric representation of yourself as a T-shaped individual. And thank you very much.